by a Washington newspaperman and magazine writer named Edward G. Lowry. Well known in his day and utterly forgotten now, Lowry helped popularize the famously taciturn nature of then Vice President Calvin Coolidge. Lowry dubbed Coolidge the foster child of silence, writing in one essay that the vice president was a politician who does not, who will not, and who seemingly cannot talk. The essay that caught my eye, however, was one in which he writes about how political life in Washington proceeds from one crisis to another. He continued, "But do not despair of the Republic. The only thing one can be sure about in a crisis or situation or condition in Washington is that it is not unprecedented. It has happened before. Certainly the sons and descendants of Jeremiah have rended their garments, beat their breasts, and made such loud lamentation before the Capitol and the White House after each of our war periods. They sat about in bewilderment, as they sit now, and will again, saying to one another, 'Was there ever such an extraordinary situation? Was there ever such another mess as we find ourselves in now? Was there ever such another set of dolts, knaves, and incompetents in command of our destinies?' The answer is, there was. This is not the first time that the wind has moaned through the rigging." My first book, The Pursuit of Happiness in Times of War, was an examination of how American presidents and other national leaders employ the language in the Declaration of Independence to rally their countrymen in times of war or national peril. It was published after September 11, 2001, about the time of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and landed me on C-SPAN's Book Notes program, hosted by C-SPAN founder Brian Lamb. Brian is the rare on-air host who reads a book before interviewing its author. This is not always good for the writer. Brian noted during our interview that as far as he could tell, I didn't have a bad word to say about any U.S. president. There was an answer to this observation, but I didn't give it. "You'll notice that Richard Nixon's not in it," I quipped. This was supposed to be a laugh line, except that Brian Lamb, who was disinclined to indulge his guests by playing the straight man, barely cracked a smile. In time, I came to see that there was something else wrong with my jibe. It was a cheap shot. To atone, Nixon is mentioned in this book. I'll do it right now, because on April 13, 1972, he said something pertinent to this project. Speaking in Ottawa at a formal dinner hosted by the Canadian president, President Nixon told a self-deprecating story about playing golf in Canada when he was vice president, and how their group went to a pub afterward without changing clothes and without the presence of Secret Service agents. "We went in and sat down," Nixon recalled. "The waiter looked us all over, and some way he seemed to think he recognized me, but he wasn't sure. After we had finished, he was a very polite waiter, and were ready to leave, the waiter came up and said, 'Sir, if you don't mind, I have a bet with the bartender, and you can help me win it, or I might lose it.' 'What is the bet?' Nixon asked. 'I bet him $5 that you are Vice President Nixon.' 'Well, call him over and we will confirm it,' Nixon recalled. The bartender paid the bet, but as Nixon left the pub, the bartender mumbled to the waiter, 'You know, he doesn't look nearly as bad in person as he does in his pictures.'" Richard Milhous Nixon, speaking 2 years before he would resign from office to avoid impeachment, then summed up the moral of his vignette. "Maybe none of us look quite as bad in person as we may in our pictures," he said. "We must never miss the opportunity to see each other in person, to discuss our differences." These are words to live by, especially in today's politically divided America, where the election returns that don't go our way prompt rival inauguration weekend parades and #NotMyPresident campaigns on social media. Anyway, Nixon also told his audience about speaking in Guildhall in London in 1958, and how the most eloquent speech, and the briefest one,